For USCFootball.com, I'm Jack Smith, alongside Chris Treviño for instant analysis from USC's Tuesday evening practice of the Cal Week. Chris, I'm not going to beat around the bush really today. Vibes are off here at USC.
Vibes are completely off this week. We'll get more into that, but what vibes aren't off are the weather. Perfect weather today, nice little chill, enough for a hoodie, but also you can rock a t-shirt. So those were the only good vibes for today was the weather, Jack.
Yeah, big possible explanation for the vibes being off. The Trojans are without their leader. Lincoln Riley, USC's head coach, missed his second straight day of practice today with an undisclosed illness. It's kind of like a football injury report. He is day-to-day. Dennis Simmons took over for him as acting head coach through practice today as well as yesterday. USC is working with the compliance office, trying to get Kliff Kingsbury on the staff as an assistant while Riley is gone because they've got one more coach spot. But everything just feels a little bit off, and maybe one of the explanations is Riley's not around for these first 2 days of practice of the Cal Week.
Yeah, we knew he was sick. We reported in the war room going into this week, but you didn't really get a sense of how sick. You know, if you saw the Thursday Zoom presser, you saw something was off, but it looks like it has carried over into this week and gotten worse. Doctor's orders have him not here at practice, so Dennis Simmons is leading the charge. The interesting detail is the Kliff Kingsbury note about how and this was informed to us by USC's SID, gathered us up before practice and gave that official statement about Lincoln being sick, Dennis taking over the head coaching duties for this week, and then the note about Kliff Kingsbury, and then working with compliance to get him bumped up to one of the open spots with Lincoln down working from home. But I just thought that was really interesting because it tells me that Lincoln is going to be out for a couple days probably. They want that extra pair of hands, and the big question now is he going to be able to coach on Saturday? Is it just like the players? If you don't coach in practice, you get to coach on the games. I don't know, but just that they're getting Kliff Kingsbury or trying to get him prepared to be an on-field coach tells me that, hey, we have to look out for the fact that maybe Lincoln Riley isn't coaching in this game on Saturday.
Yeah, and there's obviously a lot of questions stem from that. Well, who's the acting head coach? It would be Simmons. Simmons was asked, well, who's the offensive play caller? He kind of laughed it off, said we'll cross that bridge when we get there, but everyone told us today, including Simmons, that Kingsbury has been taking on a more quarterbacks coach role in these last couple of practices where he's working with the quarterbacks, which really means he's working with the whole offense as we see Lincoln doing often, but we still kind of are in the dark on who would be the offensive play caller, who's really the head coach making all the decisions. Would that person be on the field or in the booth? There's a lot of questions that we still have to have answered, but there weren't a whole ton of answers out there on the field today.
I don't think we're going to get any of those answers. Maybe if Lincoln Riley does the Thursday presser Zoomer from his house, his beautiful house out there in wherever he lives. But if he does that, maybe we'll get a little bit insight, like who would maybe take over. But I sincerely doubt that we're going to get any of those answers out there. And remember, we could not watch any of practice. We had the same amount of practice availability that we had last week, which was, basically just the team warm-up stretches, and then we were booted. Did not see scout, did not see anything. Didn't even get to see really like Dennis Simmons act as a interim head coach or anything like that. Nothing. We were basically that Grandpa Simpson meme where he walks into the restaurant, puts his hat down, puts his hat back on, and walks out. That was basically us today for the second straight week. So yeah, practice availability in terms of watching practice has become sort of useless at this point because you can't really glean much from watching them stretch. So that was about all we got there. We cannot guess how, like, who's calling plays, where's Kliff working, what Dennis's role is. He said his role has not changed at all. That's what he said. So I don't know. There's just so many unanswered questions about this week and this team in general.
Unlike after the game against Utah, we did get to talk to players today. We didn't actually get to speak with any players, if you weren't paying attention, after the game against Utah after the loss. It was just Lincoln Riley on the podium, which is very unnatural. Ryan, who's worked here for 20 years covering USC, said that's the first time he's ever seen no players made available after a game, especially after a loss. It's tough to not be able to talk to players, but we did get to talk to a handful of defensive players today. A lot of them were tight-lipped on the situation, saying practice isn't much different without Lincoln Riley. Dennis Simmons is kind of doing the same thing, just being a little bit more of a leader. What did you take away from some of the biggest player interviews today?
That was my first question for Zion Branch. Is like, hey, how has practice been without, the head coach, the man, the imposing figure that is Lincoln Riley? He's a guy, he's a coach who goes by his first name and is known by his first name, Lincoln. So how was it? He was like, didn't really notice a difference. Lincoln Riley has built a foundation that people can just step up into a role, and even if that's like a safety who goes down or offensive lineman who goes down or even a coach that goes down, someone is there to step up and replace them, and next man up kind of mentality. That's how Zion Branch kind of broke it down to me. He said he's felt like they've had 2 really good days of practice, but for the most part, it's been business as usual. That was a line thrown at us a lot.
I feel like the one constant, the one normal thing about this Tuesday, we got to talk to defensive coordinator Alex Grinch. A rough week for his unit against Utah. What were some of your biggest takeaways from what Grinch had to say?
I don't really know, Jack. I just feel like it's kind of the same thing we've been hearing. There were some miscues. They're still playing hard. He was asked about the Braylon Shelby cornerback situation. He said it was kind of, you're in the back. It's kind of hard to hear, but he said something about percentages, and that was just something they were kind of rolling the dice on, and then obviously Utah burned them on it. I can understand the first time, but the second time, Utah might have seen that and gone, hey, that worked for us really great in the first half. Let's do it again, and end up being on the critical drive of that game. So I don't know, really. You can go watch the interview, but it just felt like maybe we're crazy. I just felt like, we see these things, but what is being said to us is not exactly what the answers we're looking to get. I know USC fans are looking to have. So it was just I don't know, just like the whole vibes of this week, it's just off, Jack. You could probably do a better job explaining it.
It was just a lot of the same isms that we're hearing every week.
Isms.
We're not that far away. We're closer than you would think. All of these kind of things, we're giving good effort, but there's just a couple things that are going wrong, and when we clean up those miscues, we'll have a good game. And it's been the same answer for every single week of the season, despite the defense, outside of the game against Notre Dame, where they played a lot better, getting worse progressively and allowing opponents to have their best games of the season. About the Braylon Shelby thing, I think basically what he was saying is they saw Utah put in this personnel group. They had a package planned out that they're like, well, when Utah's got this personnel package, we're going to put in this package. That one happened to have Braylon Shelby in it, and he said it just worked out where they had never seen out of that personnel package or with those guys on the field for Utah, there was no play on film where Sione Vaki was running a wheel route, and so they weren't planning on having Braylon Shelby guarding him on a wheel. It just happened to be the play that Utah had called, which I understand, makes sense the first time, but that's Utah throwing a punch. You have to have a counterpunch because you can't let that happen again. And it really didn't see, and I didn't really hear it either because we're in the back, but it didn't really seem like he had an answer for why it happened a second time. He explained how it happened the first time and how it can't happen again, and how they just were on the wrong side of the dice roll. It happened twice, Chris.
To quote Einstein, God does not play dice, but it seems like Alex Grinch does play dice. It does play dice, and it did happen the second time. He said it can't happen again, but it did happen the second time, so that's all I got for that.
Of the other players that we got to talk to, it did feel like they were all saying very similar things, and that sometimes happens where you've got the PR department for USC, the SID department. They're obviously having meetings before they come out and talk to us, so they're hearing something. They're hearing what the SID department would like to be said, or what to expect. It felt like we got a lot of the same answers today. A lot of the players were saying, and even Dennis Simmons very early on in his press conference said, well, we're 4-1 in the conference. We still got everything out ahead of us. We're making small mistakes. What did you gather from all the player interviews that we had today?
I did want to kind of hit on this because that has been a theme of this season, and even dating back to last season. Like, before players are given to us to talk to, they do huddle up with the SID and they go kind of over. I'm assuming we can't really hear what they're saying. That'd be a violation, but they give them talking points, what to talk about, like hit on this, don't say this, blah blah blah. So that's their job. I get that, but today it just felt obvious that was kind of what the players were falling back to, and I can understand that. You just came off an emotional loss. Maybe you don't have the energy to kind of face these questions. I get it, and maybe you're just falling back onto what you were, hinted at, nudged at to say. We're 4-1. We're now looking at it as a 4-game season. We still have great opportunity ahead of us. We can still win the Pac-12 championship. That is technically true. They have to run the table, but they can do that. They still have great opportunities in front of them. So all of those things kind of blended into, and that's kind of what we were getting back from the players. And I'm not surprised. It was an emotional loss to Utah. Very disappointed. They're very disappointed. They feel like they let the fans down. All those things, all these expectations. So I'm not surprised they kind of maybe fell back into those lines, those company lines that were thrown at them going into these media scrums. But it just felt super apparent today.
Yeah, there were definitely, and you can go listen to any of the interviews and see this for yourself, but there were times where a player would be asked a question, and that answer, it felt like was one of those company lines, but it didn't really apply to the situation. And it's like, well, it's like a politician when they get asked about a question and they're like, well, I want to talk about this. So you ask me about the environment, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do for the economy, and I'm going to find some way to just kind of work that in. And that's kind of what it felt like today with the, well, we're 4-1 in the conference. Well, we've got all these opportunities ahead of us. That's kind of how it felt today. That's how I would sum it up. The one really unique and interesting note that I got from talking to a player was with Kalen Bullock, who obviously had the pick 6. He said that at halftime he was told by a coach, we're going to need you to go score. Obviously he did that with the interception return for a touchdown. And then he was asked what went wrong in that final drive, and what did you take away from that game? Where did the defense fall short? And he's like, I don't really know. I haven't gone back and watched it yet. And he was basically saying he decided not to watch the film because it was a tough loss, didn't want to go back and watch it. He said that on the scramble for Barnes, he was in man coverage, so his back was to the play, so he doesn't really know what went wrong. And I think it's interesting, especially when we heard from Solomon Byrd on the House of Victory Tunnel Vision this past weekend. Byrd had to stay up till 3 a.m. because he couldn't not watch the game before going to sleep. He wanted to know what happened, and so it's just two different ways that players handle a loss, especially one where the defense was on the field at the end.
I can already see a lot of fans typing away, like, you have to watch that tape. How are you going to know what to fix if you can't watch the tape and see what went wrong? But again, do USC fans even trust that it will be fixed? Like, if you see it, we're 8 weeks into the season. I would feel like, I understand it's an emotional loss, painful loss. They were so close to winning that game. Maybe you're not ready to watch that film, but I think you at least got to watch it once. But again, I'm not Kalen Bullock. I'm just me. So if he doesn't want to watch the film, that's his prerogative. But if you want to go stay up till 3 a.m. in the morning like Solomon Byrd and watch it, that's also his choice.
Do you have any other takeaways from this weird, off-vibe day of practice?
I think one, I did ask Zion Branch about Bear Alexander, and obviously Bear Alexander did get ejected on that final drive, and most people probably saw that clip on social media of him being so emotional on the sideline, basically crying about, putting his team in that position and just being ejected and, kind of a turning point for that drive. And, I asked Zion Branch, like, hey, how do you guys react to that? How do you get him, how do you pick him up after a thing like that? And he says, we just tell him, it's not on him. It's one play. One play does not define it, and he's not the reason they lost. You can't act like that. It's a team effort. It's not just one person. So they've been trying to rally around him and pick him up after that, and that obviously endeared him to a lot of USC fans. I didn't see any USC fans trashing Bear Alexander on that clip. Most of them were like, hey, I want to rock with you. This is the kind of guy, this is the kind of emotion we need and fight and fire we need on that defense. And so Bear obviously endeared himself to a lot of people. So I just wanted to get a teammate's perspective on that play and how, they've reacted to kind of picking him up and after seeing, him in a very emotional, vulnerable state on the sideline.
Alexander will be suspended for the first half against Cal. That's who USC takes on this weekend. They'll head to Berkeley. Unclear whether Lincoln Riley will be joining him on the trip with his sickness, but that is yet to be seen. I think it would be kind of unprecedented. I've never seen that, at least, following USC football and following many college football years in the past. I couldn't tell you the last time I saw a coach, not go with the team because he's sick. Obviously, the dominoes that would fall will be very interesting, and we'll have more on that as it comes out.
The closest I can think of is when, I believe it was the Liberty coach, I don't know, Hugh Freeze, who was sick, and he was calling the plays from the hospital or watching from the hospital. That's like the closest I can think, but I don't think there is a hospital overlooking the Cal stadium, so I'm not sure how that's going to work, but that's the closest I can think of. And I did want to make one more parallel. If you just remember back to the 2021 season, Jack, you were probably like 10 years old, but 2021 season, the Dante Williams interim, Clay Helton fired after Stanford, Lincoln Riley is hired, and USC is making up that COVID game for Cal at the end of the year. And Lincoln Riley had just been hired, and it was this weird nexus of purgatory, because the new head coach was here, but they couldn't actually coach, and Dante was still the interim coach. And Lincoln Riley and Alex Grinch were at practice, and they were watching practice. The vibes were really weird, exciting for USC fans, but obviously very weird. There was that small player mutiny before practice. I was there covering it. I was the only one out there, and I was like, what is going on? Players were coming back in. Players were going in hey, you got to come out and practice. Some players didn't want to play. The vibes were all whack. And this it doesn't feel exactly like that, but the vibes are whack, kind of off going to this game. You don't know if Lincoln Riley is going to coach in this game. Lincoln Riley wasn't at that Cal game on the road in 2021 because he was out recruiting. So he wasn't even in the stadium in that night game. So maybe he's not in the stadium again for the second Cal road game. So I don't know. I'm just looking at the parallels. Vibes are weird in 2021. Vibes are weird this week. I don't know what's going to happen.
Well, to draw another parallel, USC is trying to avoid losing 3 straight. They've never lost 3 straight under Lincoln Riley. The last time USC lost 3 straight games was capped off by that end-of-season loss in Berkeley in 2021. So USC fans obviously hoping that history does not repeat itself. This time they have Lincoln Riley, or so they think, and we will see how that goes, obviously, when the game gets to Saturday. But that's all we've got for you guys for Instant Analysis. Make sure you're checking out all the interviews here on Inside Troy. There's a bunch of them with a bunch of defensive players. You can check out the website, uscfootball.com, for all the articles that will go up. But anyways, for Chris Treviño, I'm Jack Smith. Thank you guys for watching Instant Analysis. We'll see you tomorrow.